Hello Kill67 Gaming. I'm back again to give you another favourite 5, and we're going console specific again, this time with a lesser known system. This is going to be my favourite 5 games for the Vectrex. So back in the early 80s, I suppose actually coming out of the late 70s into the early 80s, if you went to a video game arcade, you would have been faced with many games that used vector graphics. You had obviously the big hitters with Star Wars arcade game, Atari's Asteroids. We also had Battlezone, which was a vector-based game. There was a lot of them about, and this is what the Vectrex was to bring to the home. It was not a massively successful system, although there do seem to be quite a few of them still around on the second-hand market. Very expensive, it has to be said, but it was bringing the arcade experience home. It's a very different system. It has a built-in screen. Obviously it has to have, because it has to display the vector graphics, so there was no way around it. It was always going to have its own screen, and you had overlays which you put on the screen, which would tell you, where your score was on the screen and what have you. So it was very different. I didn't have one at the time. I didn't know anyone that had one at the time. It's something that I've got into as I got more into retro gaming, and it's kind of an oddity. So you like those type of things as a gamer, especially when you're getting into retro games. I have obviously got quite used to the system now. I do very much enjoy the system. There's a lot of nostalgia with thinking back to how arcades used to be, and it's a very playable system, albeit very expensive. So we're going to start with my 5th favourite game for the Vectrex. So that was Mindstorm. It doesn't take the keenest of eyes to know that that is actually just a clone of Asteroids, which, as I mentioned at the start of this video, was one of the big hitters in the arcade that used vector-based graphics. However, very enjoyable. If, the original Asteroids game wasn't broke, so why would you try and fix it? However, as you may or may not be aware, Vectrex actually managed to find something that was fixed and broke it. There was a bug in the game, well, there is a bug in the game, where you get problems if you get to level 13. Read into that what you will. I have to say that I can't actually get to level 13, so it doesn't affect me, but if I ever do, it's going to probably annoy me a lot, but there you go. For those who did get to level 13 at the time, if you complained to, in the UK it was Milton Bradley, who distributed the system, they would send you a game, Mindstorm 2, free of charge. Now there's customer service that you just don't get today. Nowadays you get half-arsed patches that don't work and such like. It's a different era. So you definitely wouldn't get it today. It's the Mindstorm 2 cartridge is actually extremely rare. So I'm guessing that there wasn't a large number of people took up the offer, possibly because they didn't get to 13 and didn't know that the bug was there. But you know, they are out there somewhere. I'm guessing that if ever any come up, they'll be very expensive as well. So that was number 5 on my list. Now it's time to see what game is my 4th favourite game on the Vectrex. So that's Pole Position, one of the few Vectrex games to actually name another company on the title screen. It actually does reference Namco directly, which is unusual. As you saw with my previous choice, we didn't get Asteroids on the Vectrex, you got Mindstorm, so there was no tip of the hat to Atari for that. But this is Pole Position, it's an official Pole Position port for the Vectrex. Graphically, obviously the vector graphics is much better than there was a port for the Atari 2600, sorry, that I've played. Pole Position was a massive thing at the time. I remember as a kid, basically Pole Position was Pokemon. There was the cartoon series on the TV, and there was the video games, and there was all the merchandise that went with it. Massive thing for Namco it was. And they obviously had the Vectrex port. Now this game was released in '83, so it's only a year behind the arcade original. Although very different graphically, the game is pretty much the same. It's as you would expect from a racer of the early '80s. Great fun, still playable. That chase view we still get in even the most up-to-date games, you know, like the Gran Turismo and Forza Motorsport. They still, although they do have an in-car view or an on-the-front bumper, they all still carry that chase view. So obviously it's popular. Its popularity of that style of play has survived now nearly 40 years. So very impressive at the time, still much fun now, and that was number 4. And on with the list, we'll go for my 3rd favourite game for the Vectrex. Well, this is a very unique game on the Vectrex in that it's well, there isn't another platformer that I'm aware of, but it's more of a puzzle platformer. It reminds me a lot of Donkey Kong in some ways, because you're trying to climb the ladders to the top. Very, very basic game. You have to collect the key, climb up the ladders, get to the top, open the cage, and free Molly, who is your girlfriend that has been kidnapped by Spud. Very simple premise, but you know, just you'll notice when I was playing it there that the ladders in the cage aren't in a fixed position. You actually have a button to move them about, so there's a little bit of puzzle element about it that you have to move the ladders so that you can get up and down to the platforms that you want to collect the key and then get to the cage at the end. From what I understand, it was quite a popular game at the time, and in fact Spike became kind of an unofficial mascot for the Vectrex. And I can totally understand why. This is the type of game that I think as a kid would really have appealed to me, but there's enough gameplay there to keep me coming back as an adult to play the game. Obviously every time you get to the top and open the cage, Molly gets taken by Spud again. I mean, we really should tie her down, lock her in a cage ourselves to stop Spud from doing it. But more things are thrown in, so you get more enemies come on the level, and you know, the puzzling aspect just becomes a little bit harder. It's a very good game, and if you have a Vectrex, definitely recommend that you try and find it and pick it up. And now let's have a look at see what is my second favourite game on the Vectrex. So, it's a shmup. That really shouldn't surprise anyone who watches the channel. I absolutely love my shmups, and this is one of the granddaddies of them all. This is Scramble, which was originally an arcade game in, I believe, 1981, and the Vectrex port came about a year later. It's just a very good shmup. You don't need all the impressive graphics that you would get later on, and the core gameplay mechanic is very simple. And in Scramble you don't even upgrade weapons or anything like that. It's just you have a gun that shoots out the front and a bomb which you can drop on targets on the ground. What could be simpler? However, with the ever-changing enemies, and also there's several sequences in the game where actually you're flying through a tunnel, so you'll have vertical drops, and the only way you can get through them is you have to navigate your ship right to the right side of the screen, meaning that you can't see enemies coming very quickly, so that when you're dropping down you can actually edge towards the back of the screen to make the vertical drop from the top of the screen to the bottom of the screen. Absolutely ingenious level design. For me, I think it's just pitched just perfectly. That is a massive challenge, but you don't ever feel that it's impossible. And that was my second favourite. So if that was only my second favourite, what could be my favourite game of all time on the Vectrex? Well, for me, it could only have been one, Berserk. The arcade game came out in, I believe, 1980, so it was quite an early arcade game. But I remember this game in the arcade, absolutely loved it. The Vectrex port took 2 years to put together. Now I don't know if that was something that was continually worked at the time, or whether just timing of the console's release, I guess. But this is a genre of games that you don't really see anymore. We called it a maze shooter, where you had to navigate a maze filled with enemies, and you'd shoot them. The thing that's great about Berserk is you can't just mess about in the maze and take your time and pick your shots, because you're on a time limit. After a certain period of time, Evil Otto starts bouncing onto the screen, and he'll kill you. And he can go through walls. He doesn't have to chase you through the maze. You just have to get out. Wonderfully addictive game. It's not quite as twitchy as you would expect it to be, given that you've got the time limit before Evil Otto comes in. You have to navigate through the maze. And obviously, it's got that great learning curve that a lot of arcade games at the time had, where the first level's dead simple. Anyone can shoot through it, and you've got plenty of time before Otto makes his appearance. But as you progress through the mazes, the robots start firing back with increasing frequency and accuracy. Otto starts coming quicker. It's just brilliant, and a game that I would heartily recommend on any system at all. However, I do feel that the definitive home port is the Vectrex one. It's better for the accuracy of the shooting. I think most people, home port wise, would have been most familiar with Berserk on the Atari 2600. Now, although I played that game to death as a kid, as I said, I didn't have a Vectrex at the time. I had an Atari 2600. The shooting mechanic, I think more down to the graphical limitation, was very hit and miss. The hitboxes weren't great. The laser beam that you shot didn't go. It didn't fire it the way you thought it was going to. It wasn't intuitive the way that the Vectrex version is, which is why the Vectrex version, in my opinion, is the definitive home port. Incidentally, there was also a board game that was released by Milton Bradley, obviously because they had the rights to a lot of these through the distribution of the Vectrex, and they were primarily a board game manufacturer. Here in the UK anyway, Milton Bradley released a lot of video games in board game format, and Berserk was one that I remember having the board game as a kid as well. Absolutely loved it. So that's my list. Now, I don't know how many people are that familiar with the Vectrex. I certainly would like to think that more people would go out and actively look at acquiring the console and games, having seen what's available. So go out and do it now. You do need to have deep pockets. I don't know what it's like in other regions, but here in the UK, the price is comparable to a new console. There's no way around it. It's comparable to a new console. Well, maybe not the latest consoles, but certainly the price is comparable to the PS4 for launch version, the Xbox One launch version. So that's the kind of price that you're looking at. But in my opinion, very much worth it. If you haven't already, please hit the like button. That would be very much appreciated. As would subscribing to the channel if you've liked what you've seen and haven't already. If you want to share this video anywhere, feel free to do so. I'd be very much appreciative of that. And until next time, keep gaming.